and police think the fire may have been started deliberately. It was one of 4 department stores across the country where fire broke out during the night. In the other cases, the police say incendiary devices had been planted. In addition to Dingles in Plymouth, Harrods in London and Howells in Cardiff suffered damage from small fires, all 3 shops belonging to the House of Fraser. An incendiary device was diffused safely at another of their London shops. Also in London, Selfridges had a small fire, and again the police say it was arson. What's not known is who planned the fires.
At the height of the fire at Dingles in Plymouth, the temperature reached 1,000 degrees centigrade. Television sets and aerosols inside the building exploded, impeding the efforts of more than 100 firemen who battled in vain for much of the night to save the store. At one point, there were fears that one of them was trapped inside.
We had a flashover which actually was a rolling ball of fire along the 4th floor that actually blew out an external wall with its force. Obviously, at that stage, it took 5 or 6 minutes to establish whether we were all men were accounted for and safe before we were able to continue with firefighting inside the building.
Although the cause of the fire hasn't yet been established, police say they're investigating reports that threats have been made against the House of Fraser say they will rebuild Dingles from the ruins left this morning.
Case of incendiary bomb attacks across the country.
The fire began at 10 o'clock yesterday evening on the 3rd floor. It quickly spread to the roof and along the whole length of the building. Firemen had to run for cover as sections of the roof exploded, showering them with debris. At one point, a fireball flashed through the store. The explosion ripped a hole in the side of the building, letting in more air to fan the flames. It was feared at first that a fireman was trapped inside the building after the explosion, but he'd got out safely through another exit. As the blaze continued through to the small hours, the crowd of onlookers scarcely dwindled. Part of the city centre was sealed off to allow the 120 firemen to do their work. At times, the flames seemed to have died away, but then they'd suddenly burst out again, sending flames shooting high into the sky. Senior detectives are saying that the blaze was probably caused by a firebomb, planted most likely by animal rights activists protesting at the sale of fur coats. Last night, other devices were found at major department stores in Cardiff and London.
This lunchtime, the Dingles building is still smouldering. We cross now to Chris Rogers, live from Plymouth city centre.
The House of Fraser flag still occasionally flutters defiantly over the smouldering ruins of the top floors of Dingles this afternoon, but the weather really says it all. It's grey, sombre, almost funereal. Some of the woodwork still breaks out in flame, but the damage has been done and it will be many millions of pounds worth. Forensic scientists are investigating the damage, but no blame or reason is being given as of yet. House of Fraser executives are down inspecting the damage as well, and it will be some days before structural engineers can pronounce about the future of the building. The last time that Dingles was hit in anything like this was by the Luftwaffe, and that rose in 1951, phoenix-like from the ashes. Many of the staff today have that same spirit, that the store must come back from the dead. This is Chris Rogers handing you back to...
Link the fire with the other incidents, and no person or organisation has claimed responsibility.
Now today's other news. 70,000 hens on a poultry farm near Yeovil will be...
often having to retreat from falling masonry and rubble. The intensity of the blaze meant that forensic experts have not been able to start work on the cause of the fire or speculate about any links between this and the other attacks.
No one was hurt, but the damage runs into millions of pounds.
Incidents at 4 other stores in England and Wales last night, all of those involved incendiary devices. Meanwhile, Dingles' parent company, the House of Fraser, says it'll be at least 2 years before the store is rebuilt. We have 3 reports on the fire, the cause and what happens now to Dingles. The first from Alan Cuthbertson, who was on the scene within minutes of the alarm being raised.
The fire began at 10 o'clock yesterday evening at the front of the building on the 3rd floor. At first, the fire brigade were worried that there might be people inside and concentrated their efforts on checking the building. Soon, though, the first turntable ladder was brought into action, pouring water into the seat of the blaze. The store relied on a system of smoke detectors in case of fire. There were no sprinklers. By 11 o'clock, the flames had broken through to the top floor of the building, and despite the efforts of the firemen, were spreading towards the back of the store. There was an early casualty as a fireman went to hospital after gashing his arm. Dingles' manager, Peter Fairweather, was called in soon after the blaze began to help firemen by explaining the layout of the store.
We've given them what help we can in terms of opening doors, turning electricity off, etc.
What departments of the store would that be?
Well, the third floor is TV audio, Christmas decorations, dress fabrics. The fourth floor has got hairdressing and furniture.
Obviously, there's going to be a lot of smoke damage as well as the fire damage. What hope do you think there is of opening even part of the store?
Well, knowing my staff and having seen some of my staff arrive already without being asked, I don't know. If we can be open tomorrow morning, we will be.
That wish was to prove hopelessly optimistic. More and more fire engines were called in as the blaze continued. There was a huge crowd of bystanders right through the night, anxious to watch the fate of perhaps the best-known store in the southwest. The fire's been going for 2.5 hours now, and it's burning more fiercely than ever. The firemen and the police have had to clear the whole area underneath where the flames are because of the risk from huge panes of glass and lumps of blazing asphalt, which have been raining down upon them. By 1 o'clock, huge billows of black smoke appeared as the bedding and furniture department caught light. The battle now was to prevent the fire spreading to adjoining shops. Soon afterwards, amid the continual popping of imploding television sets, there was a louder bang as a fireball swept through the store.
Every man inside is having to wear breathing apparatus. It's hot, it's smoky, and it's quite uncomfortable. And about 10 minutes ago, part of the fourth floor flashed over. That is, there was a rolling ball of flame through about half the length that actually has blown out one of the load-bearing walls and has caused some damage by falling brickwork to some of our fire appliances, but not to any of my firemen. We've withdrawn all the crews at the moment from that end of the building, but the fire at the moment is coming under control through the efforts and the dint of all those here.
It was feared at first that a fireman was trapped inside the building, and the men were mustered for a head count. Thankfully, they were all there. The firemen were helped in their struggle by the fact that the blaze was at night. Few people were using water, so they were able to use the mains at maximum pressure. Even so, by 2 o'clock, the fire was again officially out of control. The only tactic was to keep pouring in tens of thousands of gallons, defeating the flames by soaking what was left of the building and its contents. Eventually, the flames began to die. Firemen had won the battle to save other buildings, but the destruction of much of Dingles itself had been inevitable from the start.
Done to the fabric of the building that police investigation teams weren't able to enter Dingles until late this afternoon. The fire in the store has now become a major arson probe because of events that happened in other parts of the country. This was the scene at another House of Fraser store last night. Dow's link with the other fires has been established as yet, but inquiries with other forces were being made.
In view of the scene,
On the third and fourth floors, very little is recognisable as a department store. Clues have been destroyed, and anything that could help the experts piece together what happened has gone. The police, however, are working on a number of theories. One is that the blaze was the work of an animal liberation organisation. They've carried out attacks on department stores in the past which sell fur coats and other animal products. Dingles sold fur coats, and staff have reported to police that threats have been made. One man who believes the theory is Ralph Cook of the Devon Animal Rights Group. He also believes that the attack on Dingles was bungled.
The normal idea is that the incendiary device, then this is the result.
will there be further action?
I have no idea, but I assume so, and until shops stop selling fur, I'm sure it will continue.
Down, Dingles staff arriving for work gathered outside the burnt-out store.
Obviously, as we get more advice from our engineers, we want to return to the
Destroyed by the Luftwaffe's bombs. Its phoenix-like rise from the ashes in 1951 heralded a new era in Plymouth, indeed the whole of Britain. Today, the House of Fraser boss vowed the Plymouth store would open again.
We would like to retain the current structure. Our problem at the moment is to find out whether the structure...
Tonight, the House of Fraser chairman, Ali Fayed, is meeting directors to discuss the long-term future of the Plymouth store.
Dingles has been sealed off all day, but now we're going over live to the third floor, where Alan Cuthbertson is waiting to bring us the first television report from inside the building.
Thank you, Gillian. I must say it's very strange to be standing here on the fourth floor of Dingles, where a matter of 18 or 20 hours ago would have been in the middle of an inferno. A man who actually was here when it was still ablaze, Ross Durbin, what was it like?
It was very, very hot, very, very smoky, high up in the building. We were chasing the fire, and of course we were conscious of the fact that there was water coming through the floors, and we needed to try and preserve the stock on the lower floors.
You were saying you were chasing the fire. How do you go about tactically approaching a big blaze like this?
There are some staircases at the rear of the building which give us access to all floors, and we normally use them as a bridgehead. But because of the collapse of the building, we had to evacuate partly during the fire, and this caused the fire to regain the hold.
We've heard that a fireball went through the building. What was that like?
We think that would probably be when some of the windows fell out and there was a big inrush of air. That mixed with the flammable vapours from some of the furniture and other flammable materials, and it caused this eruption.
What's it like when that happens? What goes through your mind?
It's damned hot. You look at the staff who are with you, you need to see, is it safe, and is it consistent with our efforts to put the fire out?
Ian Earl, you've been here throughout today. What have you been doing?
Well, yes, I arrived about 9 o'clock this morning, took over from Mr. Durban, and our job really has been clearing up and knocking out small pockets of fires. And our job's been hampered a lot because as we've been through the day, different problems have arisen. The building, in fact, the 2 floors we're standing beneath here are not considered very safe, and we've been told not to go on them. And of course that's caused a great problem because small fires keep breaking out and we're not allowed to go in and put them out. So.
Obviously there are forensic investigations going on. How have they been going?
Well, they've been going very well. I've not been involved in them, but certainly teams of fire officers, police and the civilian forensic officers have been here most of the day sifting through the area which they think is where the fire started.
Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed. And the cleaning up operation and the forensic investigations will both be going on for some time to come.
Gillian. The night at Dingles was the biggest in the city centre since the Blitz, causing millions of pounds worth of damage. And it looks as if it was started deliberately, a pre-Christmas protest by an animal rights activists that could have...
...in the Devon Brigade could remember. It started on the 3rd floor in the electrical and TV department and quickly spread to the 4th and 5th floors. Within 20 minutes, the interior was an inferno. The fire raged unchecked because the store had no sprinkler system. Managers said they were amazed at the speed it took hold. The fire brigade called in crews from all over the county, using most of their resources in West Devon.
At the moment there are about 120 firefighters from probably about 10 stations in Devon Fire and Rescue Service, with about 20 fire engines of various types, and they're all engaged in the firefighting operation here.
Inside the store, walls cracked under the intense heat. Temperatures were estimated to have reached more than 1,000 degrees Celsius. 40 firemen wearing breathing apparatus battled against the flames inside the building and had to shield themselves from flying glass as television sets and windows exploded. Perfume bottles and aerosols added fuel to the fire as they too exploded. No one was inside the store, but at one stage it was feared that a fireman was missing when part of the 4th floor wall collapsed, sending 25 tons of masonry onto fire engines below.
We had a flashover which actually was a rolling ball of fire along the 4th floor that actually blew out an external wall with its force. Obviously at that stage it took 5 or 6 minutes to establish whether we were all men were accounted for and safe before we were able to continue with firefighting inside the building.
Even on the outside it was so hot that the firemen had to use remote-controlled jets to pour thousands upon thousands of gallons of water into the building. South West Water had to increase the pressure in the pipes because the demand was so great. As the exhausted firemen snatched brakes, they were replaced by colleagues, and eventually they seemed to be winning the battle.
It's 3:15 now, and firemen have been fighting the blaze for nearly 6 hours. It's said to be under control, but behind me the building is still burning.
By dawn the fire was out, but the brigade was still there damping down the twisted wreckage of the devastated store.
Since the initial call, which I believe was about 10 o'clock last night, we lost all track of time, and I couldn't really tell you what time we turned out.
Later, senior officers praised the courage and professionalism of the men who fought such a huge fire, which thankfully resulted in only one minor injury.
Although firemen were on the scene within minutes, the blaze was already so intense it took 7 hours to bring under control. Crews had to be drafted into Plymouth from outside the city.
The last staff left the building for the night at 8 o'clock. 2 hours later, the fire broke out on the 3rd floor. The fire brigade was called at 4 minutes past 10, and within 5 minutes the first fire engines were at the scene. By 11 o'clock, with the fire spreading to the upper floors, firemen were arriving from as far afield as Totnes and Oakhampton. At 20 past midnight, with the fire at its height, 120 firemen were at the scene. 40 men wearing breathing apparatus were inside the building. At 1:30, a build-up of oxygen kindled the fire on the 4th floor, causing a massive explosion which ripped out the back wall of the building. The fire was finally brought under control at just after 5 o'clock this morning.
Despite the morning rain, smoke still drifted from the mangled upper floors of Dingles as the Devon and Cornwall police helicopter made this reconnaissance flight. The extent of the damage came as a shock to many Dingles staff. The store had smoke detectors and alarms, but no sprinkler system. Some shop questions about anything thought of a device in a House of Fraser store in Birmingham. But at his morning news conference, the head of Devon and Cornwall CID was guarded. Made for forensic scientists, scenes of crime officers and fire officers to start combing the wreckage of Dingles for clues. Police appealed for anyone shopping at Dingles yesterday who might have seen anything suspicious to contact them.
And tonight the forensic examination here is being
contributed to the scale of the fire.
It's very hard to say in hindsight. I think we can always be wise looking back, but no.
And they've provided space for a telephone helpline, which Dingles staff can call to keep abreast of what's happening. However, it won't...
Rights activists, but the police say they've had calls claiming responsibility from a number of other groups. Other stores in the Plymouth area have received threats and hoax calls since Monday's blaze. The police have warned shoppers to be extra vigilant during the run-up to Christmas. Forensic experts believe the fire started in the washing machine section of the electrical department. These photographs show a stark contrast between its appearance before and after the fire. Police want anyone who was in the electrical department on Monday and saw anyone...
and would have tackled it. It may well have controlled it completely.
Do you think shops should be made to have sprinkler systems?
Well, yes, sprinkler systems would be ideal, but